What about moving fluid between two compartments of extracellular fluid? Remember that unlike transport across a cell membrane, blood and interstitial fluid have very similar amounts of dissolved ions. So what causes the fluids to move from the interstitium to the plasma, or vice versa? There are a couple of things. Most importantly, hydrostatic pressure and colloidal osmotic pressure. The primary force that moves fluid between the capillaries and the tissues is hydrostatic pressure. The pressure exerted by blood against the wall of the capillary is called capillary hydrostatic pressure, or CHP. CHP drives fluid out of the capillaries and into the tissues. There is an opposing hydrostatic pressure called interstitial fluid hydrostatic pressure, IFHP, but the CHP is almost always considerably higher than the IFHP because lymphatic vessels are continually absorbing excess fluid from the tissues. So fluid normally moves out of the capillary and into the interstitial fluid in a process that we call filtration. The opposite of filtration is reabsorption, the movement of interstitial fluid back into the capillaries. The process is driven by osmotic pressure. Osmotic pressure is determined by the osmotic concentration gradients between the blood and the interstitial fluid. It's important to understand that the formed elements of blood, like blood cells, do not contribute to the osmotic concentration gradients. The solutes, like sodium chloride and bicarbonate, don't matter too much either. The solutes will move across the capillary wall according to their own concentration gradient, but overall the concentration should be similar and won't have any significant impact on osmosis. What really matters are the plasma proteins. Because of their large size and chemical structure, plasma proteins aren't really solutes. They don't dissolve. They're a colloid solution. This is why we talk about colloidal osmotic pressure. The plasma proteins suspended in blood can't move across the capillary membrane, so they stay in the plasma. As a result, blood has a higher colloidal concentration and lower water concentration than tissue fluid. The net effect is that it draws water into the plasma. Water is drawn from the tissue fluid back into the capillary, carrying dissolved electrolytes with it, and we call this reabsorption. So when we see edema, we know that something is wrong. There's either too much hydrostatic pressure or too little colloidal osmotic pressure. Of course, biology can't be that easy. In addition to concentration gradients, graded protein channels, and all the rest, there are also hormones. And that's where the RAAS system comes in. That's the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. It's a hormone system that's essential to the regulation of blood pressure and fluid balance. The big players here are the three hormones renin, angiotensin II, and aldosterone, and the primary regulatory mechanism is the rate of renal blood flow. So there are a couple of things that can trigger the system. The first and most important trigger is hypotension. Second, the sympathetic nervous system can cause direct stimulation of the beta-1 adrenoreceptor of the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Third, macula densa cells are in the distal convoluted tubule, the DCT. When blood flow is reduced, much of the sodium is already reabsorbed before it gets to the DCT, and so the macula densa cells interpret that as hypotension. They then signal the JGA, or the juxtaglomerular apparatus, to produce more renin via a prostaglandin messenger. This all happens in the kidney. Angiotensinogen, which quickly becomes angiotensin, is produced in the liver and circulates freely in the bloodstream. When it contacts renin, it's converted into angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2, largely in the lungs. Angiotensin 2 is a busy hormone. It affects the kidney by causing sodium reabsorption, which in turn causes water retention, and can help increase stroke volume. It affects smooth muscle cells all over the body, but particularly in the blood vessels. It causes them to contract, thereby increasing peripheral vascular resistance and raising blood pressure. At the pituitary gland, angiotensin II causes antidiuretic hormone, or ADH, to be released. ADH also causes water retention and increases stroke volume. It also increases peripheral vascular resistance. And at the adrenal gland, it causes aldosterone to be released. Aldosterone also causes retention of sodium and water. And that's the simple story of how the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system maintains fluid balance, and more importantly, how it maintains blood pressure.